Back again. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Again, try not to take too much of the time talking myself because I'd much rather hear what she has to say. Sarah Goff-Dupont works at Atlassian, which is now making boatloads of money, as I understand it. Recently went public. So hopefully we can learn something about that from her. But I heard a version of this talk 2 years ago at DevOps Silicon Valley. And at that point, it was an insane conversation to have about, like, let's involve marketing in this DevOps thing. We can't even get developers and operations talking yet. But that conversation started to change a little bit. And I talked a little bit about that this morning of trying to get more and more groups involved, not just dev and ops and DevOps, but really collaborating across the business. I think Sarah is a fantastic representation of that. So despite, or perhaps because she is in marketing, she has a lot of value to add to this conversation of how far across the business can we reach in our efforts to collaborate. So with that, looking forward to hearing from Sarah.
Thanks, Donnie. Hi, I'm Sarah. Whoa, that was loud. Hi, I'm Sarah. And the reason that I was inspired ultimately to get up and talk to you today actually relates to a really crappy experience that my husband had a few years back. He's also a developer. So this is my family, the aforementioned husband, our 2 kids, and this is, first of all, a shameless attempt to mollify my audience with pictures of adorable children. Is it working? Sweet. Oh, thank you. But really, I put this up here because it gets to the heart of why I care so much about DevOps. So the crappy experience that I mentioned happened a few years back when the sales team at the company where my husband was working made a really big sale to a really big client, which sounds great, right? Except the thing that they sold the client on hadn't been built yet. It was in the works, but it was not ready for consumption. And the timeline that they promised that on, totally out of touch with reality. I mean, as far as anyone could tell, the sales team didn't even consult the development team at all in terms of how long it was going to take to get this stuff ready. So you may be able to guess what happened next. Mandatory Saturdays. Yes, woohoo! How many of you have had mandatory Saturdays for a similar reason? Anybody? Wow, the spotlight is really bright. Okay, so a few of you. So at the time, our first child was maybe about a year old, and so having Sam sequestered away all day on Saturday really put the pinch on me logistically, on our whole family. So to say that I was pissed off was an understatement, and not just because of the logistical, household stuff. Because here I was, a newly minted marketer at the time, having just come off of 8 years in engineering. And these stupid people at my husband's company were perpetuating every single stereotype that developers have about marketing and sales. So it was frustrating on just about every level imaginable. And as the show of hands just now realized, I'm not the only one who's gone through this before. So I thought, man, there has got to be a way to avoid this kind of crap. And so I started looking for ways to do just that. And that's what I'm going to be talking about for the next 20 minutes or so. But first, let me back up a step. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm on the marketing team at Atlassian. We make some tools that you might use like Jira, Confluence, or BitBucket. This is my 4th time attending Devops Days and my 2nd time speaking. And I learned so much at these events. It's just great. And I'm so honored to be able to stand up here and give a little bit back this time. I'm especially excited to be here in Minneapolis in particular because I'm a Minnesota native. I grew up just down the road in lovely Mankato. And I'm so stoked to be here with my people. I feel like I can let my accent out to play a little bit. I usually have to kind of keep it under wraps when I'm in California. So one of the reasons that I'm so enthusiastic about DevOps is that despite the fact that I no longer even have Git installed on my laptop, the DevOps community is so inclusive that there's still a place in it for people in roles like mine. And that's really the core of what I'm going to be talking about today as ways to get people on technical teams, particularly product development teams, to work more closely with the people on the teams who market and sell those products. So as you may have guessed, this is primarily a culture and sharing talk, not so much on the automation or measurement. Now, in my experience and in the experience of many software people I know, there tends to be an antagonistic relationship or a strained relationship between, I'm just going to say marketing for short, but I really mean sales and marketing, between marketing and development, or engineering, we'll say. There tends to be sort of a power struggle over whether the company culture is dominated by engineering or dominated by marketing. So you may be thinking, well, why is that a problem? That's just kind of how it is. I mean, what are we even trying to solve for here? So in engineering-led companies, it is not uncommon for the product team to build out a release or build out a bunch of features and fixes that don't necessarily align to any kind of theme or story that you could sort of take to market. So let me show you an example of this from the personal experience vault. I used to be the product marketer for Bamboo, which is Atlassian's continuous delivery server. And it's one of those installed behind your firewall type products, so it has versioned releases that we push out to the public. There was this one release that had like some truly great features in it, and some truly great bug fixes as well. But it was just kind of a potpourri of stuff that would look completely random to even an existing customer, and like a prospect probably wouldn't be able to make much sense of it at all. And so I saw this coming down the pipe at me, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to craft any kind of like story or campaign around this? I was really stumped. Now, I was kind of fortunate in that the release happened to be right around Valentine's Day, and it happened to contain a bunch of improvements that existing customers had been asking for. So, feel the love with Bamboo 4.4. That is some weak sauce right there. But it was honestly the best I could come up with at the time. So let's just say that I was not super proud of myself. My boss was not that impressed, and I didn't exactly nail my renewal and evaluation goals for that release. Now, on the flip side, in sales-led companies, it's not uncommon for engineering to just get steamrolled. Like maybe what you'd like to do this quarter is pay down some technical debt before it gets crippling, but there are revenue goals to meet. We've got bills to pay. And as much as you'd like to, you can't sell customers on bug fixes or refactors or a slick new continuous delivery pipeline. So what do? You build some new shiny stuff instead. And if you're really unlucky, you get sent on a death march like what happened to my husband in order to build the new shiny stuff. Now, I don't think it's healthy for companies to be sales-led or engineering-led. I think there's a middle ground where we can come together because we need each other. If one group is always subservient to the other, the product suffers, revenue suffers, and we are all out of a job. So I'm going to talk about 5 or maybe 6 steps that we can take towards each other. And everything that I'm going to talk about has been battle tested either by me or by my colleagues in marketing. And in many cases, yeah, I'll be speaking from personal experience. Note that because this room is heavily dominated by people on the engineering side of that equation, I'm going to be speaking in terms of ways that engineering teams can take some initiative and make that first step. And the next time I get up in front of a room of 600 marketers and salespeople, I promise I will encourage them to take the initiative. So let's start with agile stuff, like co-location. We've heard a lot about this in terms of developers and operators sitting together. It works with marketers too. Now, this is something that I never personally got a chance to do because when I was product marketer for Bamboo, my product development team was split between 2 different cities on 2 different continents, neither of which I lived in. So I didn't really have the option to go sit with them. But I have seen this succeed with lots of teams at Atlassian, where the product marketers just go and sort of nestle themselves in amongst the developers. Here's an example. This is the Atlassian Marketplace team. They're called the Ecosystem team now. Their product is the marketplace site for add-ons to Atlassian products. And they also develop the core add-on API that all of the products and the add-ons use. Their marketer's job then is to encourage third-party developers to build add-ons, and then of course encourage Atlassian customers to use those add-ons. So you can see here we've got developers sitting next to a designer. I think the technical documentations person is like somewhere in the picture, but I didn't label her. We've got a couple of marketers up here. You can see the laptop of the business unit general manager. They're all sitting like right next to each other. So there's nothing like physical proximity when it comes to fostering collaboration and empathy. There's that word again, empathy. We keep hearing it, and because it's important. If your product marketers are in the same building as you, or if they're even on the same campus as you, consider inviting them to sit with your team. Even having them sit with you 2 or 3 days a week can make a big difference. And we're mobile. We don't have 2 or 3 monitors set up at our desks. Have laptop, we'll travel. We can come to you. And it's not that sitting together means that suddenly your work is going to overlap a bunch. That's not what this is about. It just means that you're going to become more familiar with their world, and they're going to become more familiar with your world. My marketing teammates who do the co-location thing say that they now have a much better understanding of why it can take so long to make a seemingly simple change. They didn't understand before that that seemingly simple change could introduce risk that they hadn't appreciated. Or it might even lead to questions about like how the entire product is architected, just from like that one seemingly simple idea. And then developers report pretty much the same. They now have a much better understanding of all the hard work that marketers do, optimizing content for search engines, planning and executing and analyzing campaigns. I mean, they get now how not fluffy modern marketing is. Now, if physical co-location isn't possible, invite sales and marketing to your sprint demos. I'm assuming that everyone does some flavor of Agile or demos something occasionally. I used this team with the Bamboo development team for a couple of years, and it really helped me stay on the pulse of what was going on with the product. We did have an extra challenge, though. I couldn't just waltz into the conference room because, as I mentioned, the product development team they were split between Sydney, Australia, and Gdansk, Poland. And I was in San Francisco. So now, Sydney and Gdansk, their work hours overlap just a tiny bit during the Northern Hemisphere's summer, and they don't overlap at all during our winter. And then for me in SF, the little overlap that did happen was at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we had to find a workaround. So for each sprint demo, we set up a page on our intranet with links to all of the user stories and bug fixes that were going out that were being demoed that day. And so then the team in Sydney would meet and they would run through their demo. The team in Gdansk would do the same thing. And then they would also record a screen capture of it. And they would embed that right there on the page like you see here. And in case you're wondering, we'd post this on, I think, Vimeo or YouTube. And you can password protect this, which made our product manager and our business unit manager sleep a little bit better at night in case prying eyes came to look around. So between meeting live and the online component, everyone involved with the product was able to stay up to date at a really granular level on what was changing. And we were able to do it in this really, I guess I'd say like an organic sort of way. I didn't have to cram all this information into my head right before the release. And by the way, we didn't include just marketers. We also had our tech docs writer and our customer support engineers looped in on all this. Now, it was great for me as a marketer because when I worked the booth at trade shows just like this, I was able to answer people's questions in much greater detail than I would have been otherwise, sometimes at a level of detail that actually surprised them. And then there were a couple of instances where I noticed something in the demo that maybe wasn't like a marquee feature, but kind of tripped that like, oh my gosh, actually this really contributes to some larger marketing story that I'm trying to tell. An example is when we added support for scaling up build agents with Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, the development team added that like as an afterthought, really. Like somebody whipped that up in their 20% time. And we weren't planning on making any hay of it, but I was like, oh my God, like for a CI in the enterprise story, that's awesome to be able to scale like that so quickly. And the product manager hadn't thought to tell me about it. It was only because I was there in the demo that I got to pick up on that. So, as you're kind of talking to your marketers and trying to sell them on the idea of coming in and, being part of your demos, this is the kind of story that you can relate to them, like something, a way that they are going to benefit from that. And then there's road mapping. So when I was doing product marketing for Bamboo, I would just have a simple bi-weekly sync with the product manager and the lead developer. And we'd talk about what was coming up in the product for about the next 6 months. which was awesome because I could get a head start on kind of thinking about how I was going to position the product or how I was going to build out campaigns over the next 2 or 3 releases. And the other reason that it was great was because I was able to see that far ahead, I was able to ask questions about like, hey, you know, these 2 things, they're really related. Could we group them together in the same release perhaps? Because that would be kind of cool from a marketing standpoint. And sometimes the answer was yes, and we rearranged a few things on the roadmap, and sometimes the answer was no. I mean, as you're well aware, sometimes things have to be built in a certain order for technical reasons. And okay, I can accept that. What was great on a practical and frankly emotional level was just being able to have that conversation and understand why. So that's the caveman way of collaborating on roadmaps. I also love the way that the Jira Service Desk team does it. So here is a Kanban board that the lead product manager sets up. So I hope you can see this in the back. Each column represents a month. Each swim lane going across represents like a work stream or a theme for the product. And each of these little squares represent, those are epic issues. And so he places them in the column for the month in which they anticipate releasing that epic. And then if you drill down into the epic, you'll see inside of it links to the composite or the component user stories, link to design specs, any kind of requirements documentation, that sort of thing. So it's really easy for a marketer to get a lot of context around the changes that are coming up. And I really love this as a way to map out releases because it works so well in a continuous delivery context. So Jira Service Desk has both like an on-your-premises server deployment option and then also a we host it in the cloud option. And they have about half of their marketing team dedicated to this like cloud-first marketing mindset. So what's so great is that with that kind of a long view, they can think about like these larger thematic changes coming up in the product and how they're going to talk about those rather than just talking about like the incremental change that we released out to customers this week. Of course, we also do, you know, like when you're telling that larger thematic story, you also mention the incremental change that you released this week, but that in and of itself is not terribly interesting. So that wraps up the Agile theme stuff. The next theme I want to talk about is kindergarten. Why kindergarten? Because one of the most important things that we learned in kindergarten is sharing, and sharing is hard. But sharing is so important that it is almost universally recognized as a pillar of DevOps. And one of the ways to foster better coordination with your sales and marketing teams is to share your tools. You don't need to give them access to your repos, and for the love of God, do not give us root, not like you would, but you wouldn't, right? But you know, some things that go with it some things just need to be said. Anyway, tools that you use for issue tracking, whether that's Jira or Pivotal or Trello or something like that, and then whatever you use for document sharing, whether that's Confluence or Asana or Basecamp or SharePoint, those types of tools can and should be shared in common. Now, I could wax philosophical all day long about transparency and visible work and a culture of trust, but shared tools ultimately is about practicality. Without shared tools, collaboration hacks like a Kanban board for your roadmap or a page to, with an embedded video of your sprint demo, those things are going to be so difficult and cumbersome and painful that they are almost guaranteed to fail. And I understand that, for someone like me who works at a company that makes collaboration tools, it's really easy for me to take it for granted that, of course everyone is going to have access to all of these systems. And I realize that at other companies that may not be the case, and there could be a cost associated with that. But I want you to keep in mind that shared tooling doesn't have to eat into your operating budget, at least not right away. There are so many free tools out there between Google Docs and Evernote and Trello, and whatever other open source issue trackers and wiki, there are definitely enough options for you to just start with something free as kind of a pilot program and then move on from there. It's okay to be scrappy with this kind of stuff at first and then get more sophisticated and streamlined as you go along. Okay, now sharing your toys is one kind of sharing that we learned in kindergarten. The other is sharing things about yourself, sharing information. So within the context of this talk, the information, or the sharing information isn't necessarily about like sharing your accomplishments. It's more, it's really about helping one group understand where the other group is coming from. What are their goals? By what standards is their performance judged? Where are they struggling? Where are they kicking ass? This kind of sharing is basically the grown-up version of show and tell. So from the dev and ops side, we have found that it's useful to share information on alerts, uptime, technical debt, especially user-reported and user-voted bugs, if you have such a system in place. Now, this is stuff that you likely measure and track for the sake of your own team, so it's really not hard from a logistical standpoint to share that with your sales and marketing team. The hardest part is probably getting over the psychological hurdle of exposing that much information about yourself and trusting the other teams to like be cool and not use the information you're sharing to score political points. And by the way, if the political points thing is a legit concern where you're working, come find me afterwards, because Atlassian is hiring and we have a really low tolerance for that kind of bullshit. So here's an example of a wallboard from the BitBucket team. This one shows a snapshot of what BitBucket is doing right now. There's also a wallboard right next to it with aggregated data on bugs and uptime, load, capacity, all sort of graphed as trend lines over time. So I think that having easy access to this kind of data helps marketers understand release plans, or in a continuous deployment or delivery context, it helps them understand what we're releasing today or this week. Like, why 10 bug fixes and 2 features and not 10 features and 2 fixes? So as a marketer, I might be disappointed by the prioritization or of the changes in the product, but at least I've got context. Without that kind of context in communication, it's really easy for marketers to think that, oh, those devs, like all they care about is having their perfect little code and playing with that new technology that's so hot, and they don't really care about delivering value to the customer, which totally isn't true. Devs care a lot about delivering value to the customer, at least devs I know. And similarly, on the other side, it's easy for developers to think that marketers care more about shiny new things and quick sales than we do about having a quality product and maintaining a good relationship with our customers, which also is totally not true. I mean, we aren't generally held responsible for customer churn, but if the product has high customer churn and bad word of mouth, that makes it really hard to land new customers. So yeah, we totally care. Anyway, so from marketing side, we find that it's useful to share information about sales or revenue if your company culture allows that, or maybe about leads, or progress towards revenue goals, or page views, or how you're ranking on Google for certain terms, or social chatter, whatever your marketing team is tracking, it can probably be shared on a dashboard or a wallboard like this. So seeing this info kind of information helps then development teams understand why marketing is so damn stressed when a feature slipped, or why they keep pestering you about moving that one little thing up higher on your roadmap. At the very least, if this kind of information is available and radiated, and if people are paying a little bit of attention to it, it's going to spark some conversations. And if my talk here today prompts you to do just one thing, let it be conversations. Because conversations provide context. And context, in turn, breeds collaboration. And collaboration is really what DevOps is all about. So just start talking to each other. Yes, it is both that simple and both that complicated. Even where we're at odds about one thing, there are likely still huge pieces of common ground that we can stand on together. So start inviting, start asking. And if all you hear is crickets chirping or you face resistance, reach out to someone else. It might be a matter of finding that one person on the other side who is interested in working with your group. So once you find them, hold on tight. Make them your champion and keep working with them, because the rest of their team is going to catch on before too long and join in. So I'll leave you with that thought. if you're interested in more about DevOps from kind of a cultural perspective, these are a few locations. Take a picture. Go on. That you can check out. Also, our careers site, if the aforementioned bullshit applies where you work. And if you have feedback on any of that stuff, feel free to send it directly to me, because if it's written on any of these locations, there's a really good chance that I either wrote it or edited it. So just bring your, if you hate it, tell me. If you like it, I wouldn't mind hearing that either. Feel free. Looks like we have like 5 minutes for Q&A if there are any questions. If not, then just thank you.
That was great, Sarah. I do have a mic. If I see a hand, I can bring it over to you, but only if I see the hand.
Everything was that clear, huh? Sweet.
You've given people a lot to digest, and I do have one hand over there. I'm going to run the mic.
I don't think my marketing team has ever heard of DevOps, so what's a good place to, I guess, open the conversation?
Sure. Yeah, maybe they haven't. Doesn't matter. Don't even use the D word with them if they haven't heard of it already. So I would say maybe a good place to start is your sprint demos, or any kind of demo that you can invite them in on, because they need to know what's coming up in the product, right? So you could reach out to them and be like, hey, marketer, how about if maybe we should have you come into our demo once in a while, and I think it would really help you keep abreast of what's going on in the product, and we can talk about how you're positioning it out there in the market, and they'll love this. I want to make sure that we can work together to really nail the messaging.
She knows how to speak their language.
I do.
All right. The lights are possibly too bright for me to see any more hands, or everybody is ready to think about this and then go talk to all of our sponsors.
I love it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. One more
Thank
hand
you.
for Sarah.